August draws to a close in 1965. During these waning summer days in the small Tokyo town of Setagaya, a man named Satoshi Tajiri was born. Just 3 decades later, the face of entertainment would evolve, all because of a simple idea hatched from the remains of a childhood pastime and a piece of hardware. Tajiri grew up in the city of Machida, Tokyo, when the area was underdeveloped and maintained its rural charms. He spent a large amount of his youth collecting insects, a hobby he enjoyed immensely. The other children would call him Mr. Bug, and he had aspirations of being an entomologist. This path wasn't meant for Tajiri, though. As the years went by, urbanization crept into Machida. Tajiri witnessed as the fields and forest, once fertile with tall grass and creepy crawlies, was paved over with buildings and parking lots. More and more, the other kids remained inside to play or stayed closer to their homes, and the once thriving insect population dwindled and fled. As the years passed and Tajiri became a teenager, he discovered another passion: video games. In the early 1980s, Tajiri and his friend, artist Ken Sugimori, self-published a fan magazine called Game Freak. In 1989, the company evolved into a game developer, and in the coming years, they would experience modest success with games like Yoshi and Pulseman. However, Tajiri would often think back to his youthful fondness of insects and wish to recapture the awe he felt collecting these creatures that was lost as cities spread. He began funneling these feelings into concepts for a new game, but the idea didn't fully take shape until he discovered a little piece of hardware. When Nintendo's Game Boy was released, the console caught Tajiri's attention. He felt that the system would be a perfect match for his idea, allowing each player to have their own world to explore and creatures to call their own. The link cable adapter would allow for players to trade or battle their friends, letting the strong bonds formed within the universe of the game cross over into the real world. The idea of those bonds became central to Tajiri's concept. He wanted children to relate to these beasts, to be able to control them in situations that might represent fear or anger that they needed to overcome in their real lives. Originally, it was thought that players would have a sort of owner-pet relationship with the creatures, but this changed into more of a friendship as development continued. As such, the developers believed the ability to name every individual companion would be essential, so much so that multiple save files had to be removed to ensure that there would be enough space. It was also decided that the monsters were never to die or bleed, only faint, as Tajiri didn't want to add the pointless violence he saw sprouting within the industry. Game Freak approached Nintendo with the project, but Tajiri wasn't very hopeful for a green light. However, one of Nintendo's creative masterminds, Shigeru Miyamoto, had kept an eye on Tajiri and his project. He took the young developer under his wing and helped convince Nintendo to publish the game, shepherding the title through development. The default name of the main character's rival, Shigeru, was chosen in his honor. Early in development, Game Freak wished to call their game Capsule Monsters, but later changed it to Kapumon, and finally Pocket Monsters after some trademark difficulties. Eventually, this was shortened even further, and the iconic title Pokemon was born. Sugimori headed the development, drawings, and design team for the games, leading a team of fewer than 10 people who conceived of hundreds of monsters to populate the world of Pokemon. They settled on the 151 that would be included in this first game, and Sugimori finalized their designs in his trademark watercolor style, art that would become iconic for an entire generation of children. The game's sound was designed and music composed by Junichi Masuda, who had to be creative with the Game Boy's limited hardware. Despite having only 4 audio channels to work with, Masuda managed to craft identifiable sound effects and unique battle cries for all 151 Pokemon. The music was equally catchy and iconic, with several tracks becoming ingrained in gaming's popular culture. One track, the theme for Lavender Town, has even managed to grow its own lore, with several famous creepypastas taking cues from the unsettling track. The game's mechanics and story pull heavily from the genre of Japanese role-playing games, but introduce the concepts in a way that was digestible for newer or younger players. The title features hundreds of party members that partake in fairly complex random encounters battle system with physical attacks, magical attacks, status effects, buffs, and debuffs. Some content is gated until a certain spell or item is obtained, and the player is eventually forced to backtrack through the world. The basic plotline involves the hero overcoming the challenges put forth by various sages and collecting artifacts based around the elements, all while thwarting the plans of an organization of evildoers. Eventually, they overcome even their strongest rival, who has grown with the player through their journey, becoming the most powerful warrior in all the land. This was a genius way to introduce millions to a genre that can otherwise be difficult to approach. The somewhat crude Pocket Monsters Red and Green were released in Japan on February 27, 1996. The game was split into its two versions to facilitate community, to incentivize interaction between players. However, despite its noble intentions, this had unintended consequences. It caused many consumers to buy both versions. Considering how late this game came out in the Game Boy's lifespan, the game was a remarkable success, generating enough profit for Game Freak to completely rework the text and art assets in an upgraded version titled Pocket Monsters Blue. When the time came to translate the projects for release outside Japan, Blue version was used as the base. However, the source code for the games was fragile, a side effect of its unusually lengthy development cycle, and had to be completely reprogrammed when it jumped from Japanese to English. With the impending worldwide release, Nintendo gave the titles an absolutely massive marketing push in the Western world, spending upwards of $50 million on the brand. Some in the company believed that Pokémon themselves wouldn't allow the games to be successful. They believed that Western consumers wanted beefier monsters instead of the current, cuter designs. Tajiri and Game Freak refused to change the designs, and Nintendo released the title in North America on September 28, 1998. The games had nearly universal critical acclaim and sales numbering in the tens of millions, but just saying those numbers doesn't do it justice. The impact Pokémon had on an entire generation of kids worldwide is almost unspeakable. It's difficult to come across a child born in the late 80s or 90s that doesn't have some sort of relationship with the franchise, some of which continue to this very day. In retrospect, it makes a lot of sense. At face value, the world of Pokémon may seem sort of small. Supposed towns and villages only have a few real buildings, and even in the largest areas, most structures were purely there for show. But, in a way, this kind of represented a childhood, just as Tajiri originally intended. Each city was a friend's home or local establishment, and the routes connecting them were the streets that ran between them. It's a subtle connection hidden in plain sight, but it's still there. And that sort of rose-tinted interpretation of life might just have been what made the world of Pokémon Red and Blue so special.
What's up guys, Lee here. Thanks for watching this little look back at Pokémon Red and Blue. If you enjoyed it, show it and give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more. If there's a game you want us to do a retrospective about like this, tell me in the comments below too. A big thank you to Alex Faciani from the Decks for voicing this episode. It turned out great. And real talk, he did it in like one take. He is a voiceover king. If you want to check out his show about Pokemon, click the annotation or on the little eye in the corner to head over to the National Decks. It's great, I promise you're gonna love it.